"Get that old man off my range. He's kicking up dust." The words, sharp and dismissive, cut through the dry afternoon air. Sergeant Miller, a man whose crisp uniform and chiseled jaw seemed designed for a recruiting poster, didn't even bother to look at the figure he was insulting. His focus was 1,000 yards downrange, where a steel target shimmered in the heat, stubbornly unhit. The man he spoke of was Samuel Corbin. To the elite scout snipers of Bravo Company, he was just Sam, the quiet, stooped groundskeeper who raked leaves and trimmed the grass around their state-of-the-art training facility. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, his hands were gnarled from decades of work, and his faded coveralls were perpetually stained with dirt and oil. He was part of the landscape, as unremarkable as the scrub brush that dotted the hills. But as the crack of the high-powered rifle was followed yet again by the frustrating silence of a miss, Sam paused his raking, his gaze fixed on the distant flag, watching it do something the digital wind meters couldn't seem to comprehend. If you believe every veteran deserves our deepest respect, type honor in the comments below. Sam had been at this base for nearly a decade, a ghost haunting the edges of a world he once commanded. After his wife passed, the quiet solitude of the groundskeeper job had appealed to him. It was simple, honest work. He found a strange peace in nurturing life from the arid soil of a place dedicated to perfecting the art of taking it. He never spoke of his past. The few who asked were met with a quiet smile and a change of subject. To them, he was just an old man. But beneath the stooped shoulders and the quiet demeanor was the ghost of another man, a gunnery sergeant of the United States Marine Corps, a man who had crawled through jungles and haunted mountainsides in a war that history books were already getting wrong. His world had been one of iron sights, instinct, and a profound, intimate understanding of the wind. He saw these young Marines with their million-dollar rifles, their ballistic computers, and their meteorological gadgets, and he saw a dangerous disconnect. They were reading data, not the world. The problem was a new qualification course, designed to push the limits of modern marksmanship. The targets were smaller, the distances greater, and the wind on this particular range was a notoriously fickle beast, swirling through the canyons and creating microcurrents that defied simple prediction. For 3 straight days, Sergeant Miller's platoon, the best of the best, had failed to qualify. Their multi-million-dollar optics could see a fly on the target at a mile. Their computers could calculate for spin drift and Coriolis effect, but they couldn't account for the subtle breath of the valley. Frustration had curdled into a foul mood that permeated the entire range. They were Marines. They didn't fail. Sam watched from a distance, his old eyes picking up details the young, sharp ones missed. He saw the way the long grass in a distant patch bent east, while the mirage flowing off a rock face drifted west. He saw the dust devils forming and collapsing in the basin, each one a signal, a word in a language he knew by heart. He felt the shift in temperature on his own skin. It was a symphony of information, and their instruments were only catching 1 or 2 notes. One afternoon, seeing the sheer exasperation on the face of a young corporal who had just missed for the 10th time, Sam shuffled over. "The wind's lying to you," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. The corporal looked up, surprised. Sergeant Miller, overhearing, strode over with an arrogant swagger. "What did you say, old-timer?" Sam pointed a crooked finger toward a distant ravine. "Your kestrel is telling you 7 miles per hour, crosswind. But look at that grass down in the wash. It's barely moving. There's a pocket there. It's holding your round up, pushing it high and right." Miller glanced at his device, then at the ravine, and then back at Sam with a condescending smirk. "And what would a gardener know about subsonic yaw and transonic drift? This is science, Grandpa, not lawn care. Go trim your hedges before you get a heat stroke." The other Marines snickered. Sam's face remained impassive. He simply nodded, picked up his rake, and shuffled away, the laughter of the young warriors echoing behind him. The sting of their disrespect was a familiar ache, one he had grown used to in a world that had long since forgotten his generation's sacrifices. The day of the final test arrived, and with it came a sense of dread. This wasn't just about qualifying. It was a demonstration for the base commander, Colonel Hayes. A failure here, in front of him, would be a deep and lasting humiliation for Miller and his platoon. The wind was even more treacherous than before, a gusting, unpredictable force that made a mockery of their careful calculations. One by one, the snipers took their positions for the final, most difficult shot. A cold-bore shot on a 12-inch plate at 1,500 yards. And one by one, they missed. The metallic ring of a successful hit never came. There was only the sharp crack of the rifle, the faint whistle of the bullet, and then crushing silence. Miller's face was pale, his career flashing before his eyes. He had run out of excuses. He had blamed the ammo, the optics, the atmospheric pressure. Now there was only his own failure, laid bare for all to see. His eyes, wild with anger and desperation, scanned the area and landed on Sam, who was quietly bagging a pile of leaves near the edge of the firing line. In a moment of pure, spiteful madness, Miller decided to create a scapegoat, a final, absurd distraction. "Hey, Gardner!" he roared, his voice cracking. "You've been watching us fail all week. You seem to have all the answers. You think you can do better." The platoon turned, their expressions a mix of confusion and cruel anticipation. They thought their sergeant was making a joke. Sam stopped his work. He slowly straightened up, his back protesting the movement. He looked at the sleek, powerful rifle on the bipod. He looked at the smirking, desperate sergeant. And then, to the shock of everyone present, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. A wave of disbelief washed over the Marines. Miller, caught in his own bluff, doubled down. "Fine. You want a shot? You got it. Come on, old man. Show these highly trained Marines how it's done." He strode over, grabbed the sniper next to the rifle, and gestured for Sam to take his place. It was a setup for maximum humiliation, a way to deflect from his own incompetence. Sam walked forward, his worn work boots scuffing the dirt. He didn't look at the complex array of screens and sensors. He lay down on the mat, the movement surprisingly fluid for a man of his age. He settled in behind the rifle, his gnarled hand wrapping around the pistol grip as if it were a long-lost friend. As he adjusted the stock to fit his shoulder, a black staff car, unnoticed until that moment, rolled to a stop just behind the firing line. The rear door opened and out stepped Colonel Hayes, a man whose presence commanded instant respect. His face was a thundercloud as he took in the bizarre scene. His elite sniper platoon standing idle, and a groundskeeper lying behind one of their most advanced weapon systems. "Sergeant Miller, what in the hell is going on here?" he boomed. Miller snapped to attention, his face draining of all color. "Sir, Colonel, sir, it's a training exercise, sir," but the colonel wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the old man behind the rifle. He walked forward, his pace slowing, a look of stunned disbelief dawning on his face. He stopped just a few feet away, his gaze tracing the lines on the old man's weathered face. "Sam," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Sam Corbin? Good God! Is that you?" Sam slowly turned his head from the scope, his pale blue eyes meeting the colonel's. A flicker of recognition, a ghost of a smile, touched his lips. "It's been a long time, Major. I see they gave you a bird." The reference to Hayes' old rank and new insignia hung in the air, a relic from another time. The snipers stared, utterly bewildered. Sergeant Miller looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Colonel Hayes ignored them all. He turned to Miller, and the warmth in his voice was replaced by glacial fury. "Sergeant," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "do you have any idea who you just called Gardner? Do you know whose rifle you just mocked him with?" Miller could only stammer. "Sir, he's the groundskeeper. He's the groundskeeper," Hayes repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "Let me tell you who this groundskeeper is. You are looking at Gunnery Sergeant Samuel, the Ghost Corbin. This man was a legend in Force Recon before most of you were born. In Kisan, he and his spotter held a ridge against an entire company for 2 days with nothing but an M40 and their K-bars. He is credited with 93 confirmed kills, and the unofficial count is probably double that. He wrote the original Marine Corps doctrine on high-angle shooting and wind estimation. The very formulas your fancy computers are using, he worked them out on a notepad with a pencil in the middle of a monsoon. He once made a shot from a moving helicopter that the brass classified for 20 years because they didn't think it was possible. He taught men who taught the men who taught your instructors. You're not worthy to carry his ammo can. A profound, deathly silence fell over the range. The young Marines looked from their furious colonel to the old man, who had already turned back to the rifle, seemingly unfazed by the revelation. Miller's face had gone from white to a deep, mottled red of pure shame. He looked at Sam not as a gardener, but as a living monument, a hero he had just desecrated. Colonel Hayes composed himself, his voice softening as he addressed his old comrade. "Gunny," he said, the honorific title spoken with the deepest reverence. "Please, show them." Sam didn't reply. He didn't need to. He closed his eyes, and for a long second he was still. He wasn't on a modern training range anymore. He was back in the jungle, feeling the humid air, smelling the rain on the breeze. He felt the subtle shift of the wind on his cheek, a language he had never forgotten. He made a tiny two-click adjustment to the elevation turret, a movement born of pure instinct. He ignored the digital level, the wind speed, the humidity reading. He simply felt the shot. He drew a slow breath, let half of it out, and the world compressed to the crosshairs and the rhythm of his own heartbeat. The rifle roared, a deafening crack in the silence. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a full second and a half later, a clear, beautiful ping echoed back across the valley. Perfect, dead-center hit. Without a word, he worked the bolt with an impossibly smooth economy of motion. He settled, breathed, and fired again. Ping. He fired a third time. Ping. A fourth. Ping. A fifth. Ping. 5 shots. 5 perfect hits on a target that a platoon of the Marine Corps' best had been unable to touch all week. He had made it look as easy as breathing. He pushed himself up slowly, his joints creaking in protest. He turned and handed the multi-thousand-dollar rifle back to Sergeant Miller, whose hands were trembling as he took it. Sam looked him directly in the eye, his gaze not angry, but filled with a profound, weary wisdom. "The wind whispers," he said softly. "You just have to be quiet enough to listen." He turned to walk back toward his discarded rake and leaf bag, his duty done. But Colonel Hayes stepped into his path, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "It's good to see you, Gunny. We could still use men like you." Sam just nodded. Behind him, Sergeant Miller, his face a mask of shame and newfound awe, took a step forward. He cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. He straightened his back and snapped the most rigid, heartfelt salute of his entire career. "Gunnery Sergeant Corbin," he said, his voice cracking. I apologize, sir. It would be an honor, profound honor, if you'd teach us one by one." The other snipers, their arrogance shattered and replaced by a deep, humbling respect, followed his lead, their salutes a silent testament to the lesson they had just learned. The old groundskeeper, revealed as a living legend, had his dignity restored, and the arrogant young soldiers who had dismissed him were now his most eager students. It was a powerful, humbling reminder that true heroes don't always wear uniforms. They walk among us, hidden in plain sight, their greatness veiled by age and humility. True skill, real honor. These things are not measured by fancy technology or youthful confidence, but forged in the fires of experience and carried with quiet dignity. The final image of that day was not of failure, but of a beginning. It was the image of Sam Corbin, his rake forgotten, standing on the range surrounded by the nation's most elite snipers. They weren't looking at their screens or their manuals. They were all looking at the sky, at the grass, and at the old man's face, as he finally taught them how to listen to the wind. If you believe that legends never die, they just become quieter. Subscribe to my channel for more stories that honor our hidden heroes.